Hi, everyone.
Hello again. Matthew chapter 14, verses 1 to 12. We're in the NIV version.
At that time, Herod the Tetrarch heard the reports about Jesus, and he said to his attendants, "This is John the Baptist. He is risen from the dead. That is why miraculous powers are at work in him." Now Herod had arrested John and bound him and put him in prison because of Herodias, his brother Philip's wife. For John had been saying to him, "It is not lawful for you to have her." Herod wanted to kill John, but he was afraid of the people, because they considered him a prophet. On Herod's birthday, the daughter of Herodias danced for them and pleased Herod so much that he promised with an oath to give her whatever she asked. Prompted by her mother, she said, "Give me here on a platter the head of John the Baptist." The king was distressed, but because of his oaths and his dinner guests, he ordered that her request be granted, and had John beheaded in the prison. His head was brought in on a platter and given to the girl, who carried it to her mother. John's disciples came and took his body and buried it. Then they went and told Jesus.
So first we mark the contrast between John the Baptist and Jesus.
Mm-hmm.
Even Herod knows that John the Baptist, when he was alive, did no miracles, but this Jesus thinks he's hearing about him.
Doing miracles.
The contrast. So, but he reasons that no, John is risen from the dead, but now he has new powers.
Mm-hmm.
Now, it was the words, of course, of John the Baptist that were impressive. Like all the great prophets, he was fearless, and he spoke the word of the Lord, and that has an innate authority, even if it doesn't. Even if he's not a prophet in the sense of predicting the future, as so many of the prophets were, John's word was powerful. But Jesus has powerful words. He also has the demonstration of the omniscience of God and the omnipotence of God. So he has the powerful works to go along with the words.
I think here I noticed Herod's fear, because first of all, yes, he's got fear of John because John is pricking his conscience all the time, so he's afraid of John
And the people.
and he's afraid of the people because the people believe John.
Yeah.
So that puts double fear there. But then when he makes this rash promise, he fears his dinner guests because they heard him make this promise. So he's a man of power, but he's afraid.
Yeah.
He's got so much fear in him, and that made me think of, as witnesses, we lived by fear. We were ruled by fear. I don't think we always were conscious of it. But there were a lot of things you were afraid of. You were afraid of Armageddon. You were afraid you might be led astray.
Fear of apostates.
Yeah, apostates, you were made to be afraid of them. You were encouraged to be afraid of them because they might mislead you and take you away from...
And you're really afraid of the governing body and the power that God gives them.
Yeah.
And the truth is that you know, if you study the history of the organization, that fear goes right to the top, just as it does right here.
Forces them to be dependent on the governing body and on the organization, because you're afraid, even if you start to think they might be wrong, you're afraid of losing your family. So many fears.
So the only fear that the Bible justifies and can be put beside faith is the fear of God. And that puts all other fears, if not completely to rest. It makes them insignificant, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Ryle says, "We have in this passage a page out of God's book of martyrs, the history of the death of John the Baptist, the wickedness of King Herod, the bold reproof which John gave him, the consequent imprisonment of the faithful reprover, and the disgraceful circumstances of his death, are all written for our learning. Precious in the sight of the Lord is the death of his saints," says Psalm 116, verse 15. The story of John the Baptist's death is told more fully by St. Mark than by St. Matthew. For the present, it seems sufficient to draw two general lessons from St. Matthew's narrative, and to fasten our attention exclusively upon them. Let us learn in the first place from these verses the great power of conscience. King Herod hears of the fame of Jesus and says to his servants, "This is John the Baptist, he's risen from the dead." He remembered his own wicked dealings with that holy man, and his heart failed within him. His heart told him that he had despised his godly counsel and committed a foul and abominable murder. And his heart told him that though he had killed John, there would yet be a reckoning day. He and John the Baptist would yet meet again. Well, says Bishop Hall, quote, "A wicked man needs no other tormentor, especially for sins of blood, than his own heart," unquote. There is a conscience in all men by nature. Let this never be forgotten. Fallen, lost, desperately wicked as we are all born into the world, God has taken care to leave himself a witness in our bosoms. It is a poor, blind guide without the Holy Ghost. It can save no one. It leads no one to Christ. It may be seared and trampled underfoot, but there is such a thing as conscience in every man, accusing or excusing him. And Scripture and experience alike declare it. And he references for that Romans 2:15.
Conscience can make even kings miserable when they have willfully rejected its advice. It can fill the princes of this world with fear and trembling, as it did Felix when Paul preached. They find it easier to imprison and behead the preacher than to bind his sermon and silence the voice of his reproof in their own hearts. God's witnesses may be put out of the way, but their testimony often lives and works on long after they are dead. God's prophets live not forever, but their words often survive them. Let the thoughtless and ungodly remember this, and not sin against their consciences. Let them know that their sins will surely find them out. They may laugh and jest and mock at religion for a little time. They may cry, "Who is afraid? Where is the mighty harm of our ways?" They may depend upon it. They are sowing misery for themselves and will reap a bitter crop sooner or later. Their wickedness will overtake them one day. They will find, like Herod, that it is an evil thing and bitter to sin against God. Let ministers and teachers remember that there is a conscience in men, and work on boldly. Instruction is not always thrown away, because it seems to bear no fruit at the time it is given. Teaching is not always in vain, though we fancy that it is unheeded, wasted, and forgotten. There is a conscience in the hearer of sermons. There is a conscience in the children at our schools. Many a sermon and lesson will yet rise again when he who preached or taught it is lying like John the Baptist in the grave. Thousands know that we are right and, like Herod, dare not confess it. I think that's good advice for us as ex-witnesses.
Encouraging.
Yes, because you do sometimes think, where am I getting with this? It's not doing anything. I mean, we've been encouraged of late because we're seeing a lot of people leaving the Watchtower, so that spurs you on. But there's dry periods for sure for all of us, and especially connected with our own families.
If we just left, we worry about this.
Yeah, but never think that anything that you do speak on is wasted, and never think you're the only one speaking. A lot of things can be influencing your family that you're unaware of. Things they heard.
You may be the last one they'll admit it to, right?
Right, yeah. And you're not always the best one to witness to your own family.
Speak the truth and let God make it grow.
That's right.
When his time comes.
Mm-hmm.
Ryle goes on, let us learn in the second place that God's children must not look for their reward in this world. If ever there was a case of godliness unrewarded in this life, it was that of John the Baptist. Think for a moment what a man he was during his short career, and then think to what an end he came. Behold him that was the prophet of the highest, greater than any born of woman, imprisoned like a malefactor. Behold him cut off by a violent death before the age of 34, burning light quenched, the faithful preacher murdered for doing his duty. And this is to gratify the hatred of an adulterous woman and at the command of a capricious tyrant. Truly there was an event here, if there ever was one in the world, which might make an ignorant man say, what profit is it to serve God? But these are the sort of things which show us that there will one day be a judgment. The God of the spirits of all flesh shall at last set up an assize and reward everyone according to his works. The blood of John the Baptist and James the Apostle and Stephen, the blood of Polycarp and Huss and Ridley and Latimer shall yet be required. And of course he's talking Polycarp, the martyr of the 2nd century, and 3 great reformers. It is all written in God's book. The earth shall disclose her blood and no more cover her slain, according to Isaiah 26 verse 21. The world shall yet know that there is a God that judgeth the earth. If thou seest the oppression of the poor, and violent perverting of judgment, and justice in a province, marvel not at the matter, for he that is higher than the highest regardeth, and there be higher than they, according to Ecclesiastes 6 verse 8. Let all true Christians remember that their best things are yet to come. Let us count it no strange thing if we have sufferings in this present time. It is a season of probation. We are yet at school. We are learning patience, long-suffering, gentleness, and meekness, which we could hardly learn if we had our good things now. But there is an eternal holiday yet to begin. For this let us wait quietly. It will make amends for all. Our light affliction, which is but for a moment, worketh for us a far more exceeding and eternal weight of glory, according to 2 Corinthians 4 verse 17. So we'll put in a link to a video we did that is based on a PDF which you can obtain if you send us an email. By what authority? Where Christ demonstrates even more than Moses the power of the Word, his ability to predict the future, and the omnipotence of God as well. So Christ demonstrated that he was the anointed by demonstrating God's omniscience and omnipotence. Does the Watchtower pass that test? And also the playlist. No, sorry, and a second video. Do Jehovah's Witnesses show the perfect love that casts out fear, based on some remarks of Raymond Franz in Search of Christian Freedom?